It seems today's children have more fear and worry about than a lot of past generations. Perhaps it's a little to do with being focused on superheroes more than ever before. DC Comics and Marvel. Joining me now via Skype from Clarenville, Newfoundland, about 2 hours west of St. John's, is Julia Ball, a children's and families pastor and author of Conquering Fear. Julia, welcome to BCN.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, what is your book Conquering Fear all about? I'm guessing conquering fear might be a good start.
Yeah, you got it. So it's a devotional for kids ages 10 to 12, basically based on the fact that Jesus is the ultimate superhero and he can help us conquer fear.
So, in what ways does his life look like the superheroes of today's movies and comics?
Well, of course, on a kid's level, we would say that Jesus had the best superpowers ever. He could heal, he could do miracles, he could do anything. And of course, he cared for the vulnerable. We know that superheroes always take care of the weaker, the lesser of society, and Jesus did that all throughout his life.
So, why do you think we are really drawn to ordinary human beings who have extraordinary powers?
I think all of us love a good underdog story. We all love to see people who are ordinary every day who can do incredible things. And I think there's a draw in all of us to want to be able to do that too. All of us would love to be able to do something super for someone else. And so I think all of us have that draw towards that superhero story.
Julia, the Bible includes the stories of multiple heroes. How can we really teach our kids to embrace real life heroes?
Well, I think that it's a challenge because in today's world, there are so many heroes that kids are drawn to. Sometimes when I teach the Bible to kids, it seems so boring in comparison to Spider Man or Superman or one of those heroes that is out there. So I think it's important for us to allow kids to see that, unlike so many superhero stories, the stories of the Bible are actually true. They are actually things that really happen, and they're stories of God's power enabling people like me and you, and ultimately God's power through Jesus enabling people to do extraordinary things.
Should we also maybe direct our kids away from celebrities and maybe sports stars for heroes and maybe have them go look more towards pastors, firefighters, police officers, doctors, people who are saving lives or maybe putting their own lives on the line?
Absolutely. I think it's a reminder for me as a children's pastor that God uses ordinary people, people who maybe don't have superpowers like those we might see on TV or in movies, but people who are real life, everyday, ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things. So, absolutely, I think we should direct our children's attention there.
What do superheroes really have to do with helping us conquer fear?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't feel like a superhero most days, and I'm sure most kids don't. However, a reminder that there is a superhero, God in Jesus, who we can trust in, who we can hold on to, who we can put our ultimate life and our security in, is a reminder that we don't have to be afraid, that no matter what the world throws at us, we have a hero that we can count on.
Why do you think it is, Julia, that a narrative in most superhero stories have to involve both a good and evil character?
Well, it makes for a good story, that's for sure. But I think that a part of it is that we all know this story of good and evil that exists in our world. We see it, we're familiar with it all the time. Even if we don't have words for it, lots of kids don't have the words for it, but we know that there are good things, there are bad things that are happening in our world. And I think ultimately all of us are drawn to that, the idea of someone conquering, having victory over evil or bad situations.
I recently saw the movie Maleficent, and it actually shows the story of one person who's both good and evil. Maybe that also talks about our own inner struggles. What are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I believe that all of us have a struggle between what's right and what's wrong, kids included. And so I think that we all have this pull inside of us, this tension that we just can't quite figure out. And so I think it's a reminder that, and the goal of the book is to remind kids that, we all struggle with good and evil. There's inner tension between all of us, but we can ultimately put our trust in God who can help us fight that battle.
As a children and families pastor, what do you find are some of the greatest fears or struggles young people face today?
I think that we live in a world, and stats would tell us this, that kids face more fear than ever. They are afraid of all sorts of things. I recently taught a children's church class where a little girl told me she's scared of everything, Their kids are scared of loss, kids are scared of families splitting up, kids are scared of what the future will hold. They're scared of what school will happen, if they'll be good enough, if they'll be popular enough, if they'll be brave enough. I think that our world is so open and accessible to kids today that the levels of fear they have are rising.
Let me ask you something. I remember when I was a child, kids can be so cruel. And even today, like with my children as they were growing up, their friends were even crueler than some of their enemies. Why is it the kids can be so cruel? And why do other children put so much stock into the opinion of children instead of their leaders or their parents? You know?
I think all of us put a lot of stock into what our peers think. Even as an adult, a peer's opinion means a lot to me. And I think that kids are still learning. We talked about that tension a few minutes ago, that tension between us, between the right thing and the wrong thing to do. And I think so often kids, they still do the wrong thing. They're still learning what that looks like. And so I think they have a tendency to be cruel. They have a tendency to not do that right thing and that kind thing. And it ends up with a lot of kids being hurt, a lot of kids facing fears of what their peers are going to think. And so I think for all of these kids, it's just a real struggle. It's a battle for them. And I think that it can be overwhelming for them at times.
There are peer pressures, also online bullying, which we see a lot of as well. So, how do you think, as a parent and maybe leader, we should attack something like that or approach that?
Well, I think that there's a practical answer and then there's a little bit more of a theological answer. The practical answer is to remind our kids that they're not alone, to have the tough conversations about what things they are scared of, that the world can be cruel, life can be tough, and to have those conversations with them on a regular basis to let them know that we're in their corner, we have their back, we want to support them. I think the more theological answer is to remind kids that God is on their side, that He's with them, that He wants to help them overcome their fear to face these tough situations, that they're never alone.
And He is with us each and every step of the way. Now, Julie, at a time when people are in positions of authority, they're often mocked and ridiculed. Do you think we need real life heroes to look up to?
Absolutely. I think all of us are searching for that real life hero, someone we can admire, someone that will stand the test and won't let us down. We all are looking for a real life hero.
Now, your book is really about communicating a basic understanding of who God is and what He's like. Why did you choose that particular format?
I think that it's easy to just tell kids not to be scared, to tell them they don't need to be worried, to tell them there's nothing to be scared of, that they can be brave, that they can be bold. But as a Christian, I ultimately believe that fear fades away in the light of who God is and understanding the truth of who He is. So instead of simply telling kids not to be scared or to stand up to fear, I wanted to give them a true understanding of who God is, how amazing He is, how much He loves them, how much He desires to be a part of their lives. Because I believe that as kids start to understand that, that they'll begin to conquer fear. So instead of starting with the problem, I wanted to start with the solution. And once kids grasped that goodness, that greatness of God, I felt like they would be able to conquer fear in their lives.
What do you think parents and maybe churches are doing well or not so well to help future generations know and understand God?
I can only speak from my own experience, but I think one thing that churches are doing really well is giving kids lots of information. We live in a world where there are so many resources, where there are so many opportunities for kids to learn and to grow and to understand. And I see kids in my own ministry, in my own church, who have such a great grasp of who God is. They're understanding the Bible, they're understanding what God is doing in their lives and in the world. So I give props to churches who are doing that and who are doing that well. I think sometimes, though, what is missing is that opportunity to experience that or test it out for themselves, for kids to learn, why does this matter? How does this apply to my life? What does this look like in my everyday experience? I think they have the knowledge, but figuring it out how it applies to their lives can be a challenge.
Do you ever talk to children as well, Julie, about the difference between being afraid and fear?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and there's a quote that I love that says, courage is just fear that has said its prayers. I think that all of us have moments in our lives when we are afraid. It's normal. It's part of being human. And we can't deny that. We can't tell kids to never be afraid because we all get scared at times. However, I think that there's a difference in fear that paralyzes us, that keeps us from doing what it is that we desire to do, from stepping out in faith, from even doing ordinary everyday things like going to school or spending time with friends. And so I think kids need to understand that difference.
Let's talk about how you organize the book to help keep readers engaged for an entire year.
Yeah, so the book is divided into 52 weeks, and each week is composed of two devotionals that kids and their parents can sit down and read. It unpacks a Bible story or a truth about God, and then it's accompanied by four activities. So, those activities are ways that kids can have that experience I talked about earlier to not just know, but to really get their hands in some ways literally dirty through science and crafts and cooking and all these sorts of things to really experience the truth. So we start right at the beginning about who Jesus is, why he came, his life on earth, move into why that matters for our lives, and how we can live as heroes in light of Jesus, the ultimate hero.
What do you see are some of the fundamental differences of fear, what adults compared to children really fear today? Maybe kids, it's peer pressure. Adults is a fear of maybe disappointing God. Like, what are you hearing right now when you talk to both?
Yeah, I think that there are some that are really common. I think kids and adults are all scared about the future, about what tomorrow is going to hold. But for kids, it's a little more immediate. Kids are scared about what's going to happen next week, what's going to happen tomorrow at school, what's going to happen over the summer when I don't get to see my friends. Whereas adults are thinking a little more long term, what's going to happen 5 years from now, what's going to happen 10 years from now. I need long term plans. So I think that's one big difference. I think another thing is that kids are scared of everyday things that maybe as adults we've learned to cope with a little bit. Social interactions, I know so many kids who get nervous when they have to talk to someone new or make a phone call or sit in a group and answer questions, whereas adults, maybe we're nervous about it, but we've learned to cope a little bit. So I think kids have more everyday fear, if that makes sense.
What do you hope both kids and adults alike will take away from reading or studying Conquering Fear?
I hope that they'll realize that fear is a part of life, but it doesn't have to control us. In each week of the book, I include what's called a fear buster. So it's just a simple reminder of something that God can do in our lives when we're afraid. So, when I'm asking hard questions, when I don't know what to do, I can remember that God is the one who holds all the answers. So I hope kids who read the book and adults who read it along with them are reminded that fear is a part of life. But because of Jesus, because he is the ultimate superhero, as I say time and time again in my book, we don't have to let fear control us, but we can move forward into the plan God has for our lives.
Julia Ball, a children and families pastor and author of Conquering Fear. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Newfoundland.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.